Welcome to the 5th edition of Cognitive Dissidents. Of course, I'm Jorge from Geopolitics and Empire. I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves again.
I'm Monica Perez from the Monica Perez Show.
And I'm Parallel Mike of the Parallel Systems Broadcast and Parallel Mike Podcast.
So this is our monthly roundtable. It's been fun so far. I think this started out in the summer and it's going strong. And again, we do our monthly live Q&As with paid subscribers only as well, so people can check on our respective Substacks blogs to find out how to get access to that. And so we're taking a look at what's happening around the planet. And I thought we could start with the first topic being sort of color revolution, regime change stuff that's going on around the world. And let me share my screen for a second here. I got some tweets and stuff like that. And I see it's a clear trend, in my opinion, that you're seeing South Korea just declared martial law and then undeclared it. And then you have in Georgia a Rose Revolution 2.0. You had I think it was 2003 or 2003 perhaps, the Rose Revolution when Saakashvili was in power. He was a puppet of the West. And so you've got South Korea rumblings there. You've got Georgia, Romania now canceled the first round of the presidential election because they didn't get they talk about democracy, but I view Romania and all of these countries remote controlled by Brussels. It's a Brussels remote control, and so it's like you didn't vote the right way, so we're going to do this again until you get it right. And that's a classic strategy of Brussels. Brussels always, they did their referendums in Croatia and in Ireland in the 2000s. It's like the people say, we don't want EU. And then they come back with a second referendum and a third and a fourth until they get a majority that says, yes, we want to accede to the EU. But I thought some of these tweets were interesting. Sharmeen Narwani of The Cradle says, all U.S. allies are morally bankrupt. If South Korea wants genuine reform, it needs to shutter U.S. military bases and stop being a pawn in NATO's plots against the DPRK. Someone else says South Korea is under martial law. France's fake government is about to fall. Ukraine doesn't have elections at all. All the branding of democracy is peeling off, and we can see the naked imperialism that always was. And this is a great X account, Club de Cordelier. Everywhere now, democracy is being dismantled under the cynical pretext of saving the democracy. Wyatt Reed of Gray Zone says, first France, then Georgia, and now Romania. In the West, it's only democracy when the right candidate wins. And then, of course, Romania, the court annulled the presidential election results and ordered a new vote. And so y'all's thoughts as to what's going on here. I feel like it's the globalist American empire, the world government, going for the gold. It seems like they're preparing to go full spectrum dominance, and they're trying to get rid of and tie up any loose ends, essentially.
I have a couple of thoughts on that. One is, as far as the fact that it's happening all at once, and there was escalation in Ukraine, I can't help but from an American perspective to think that has something to do with teeing it up for Trump. I think that he is destined to be an agent of chaos in this way, a change agent through a dramatic stuff going on around the world. So maybe there are interventions. Actually read with South Korea that France, Germany, and South Korea, it was all budget disputes, supposedly, that triggered the conflicts that they were having. I'm just telling you what it's reported in the U.S. press. I have absolutely I think the South Korean thing, our ambassador there, Philip Goldberg, had been kicked out of Bolivia and the Philippines for trying to do coups, and both of them had coups around that time, and now he's retiring. So I feel confident we were behind that. However, they're blaming it on a budget dispute, and in turn blaming that on fears of the impact of Trump tariffs. So that gave me a little sense that this may tie in with the Trump thing. I feel like with the Georgia situation, they did not like the I guess it was Parliament, so the Prime Minister, whatever. So they didn't like that it was not Western leaning, that Parliament suspended the plan to move towards Europe. I put a little tweet in the chat if you want to pull that up. It's got a map that shows that Georgia is not anywhere near Europe. And it was funny, though, because I was watching it on CNN, and it showed a young woman protester, clearly a student, and she spoke perfect English. And she said, Georgians have yearned for centuries to be part of Europe. Have yearned for centuries. So you just pointed Georgia and then Europe. So, yeah, so maybe Eurasia. But I just thought it was funny that the perfectly English speaker was claiming that they wanted hundreds of years. But yeah, I think part of it has to do with Trump, and I think that it doesn't bode well. It feels like a world order shakeup is afoot.
And just before Mike jumps in, just to chime in, you made me think that the president of Georgia is foreign-born, French-born. Again, clear Brussels puppet, and the thing with South Korea. I think it could also be to do with Asian NATO, which I've talked about before. And maybe, as you mentioned, the coups, the West, there are still some elements of agency or sovereignty in South Korea and the apparatus, military, political, that maybe don't want to go full Asian NATO, to take on, to establish nukes in South Korea, as they've been saying. And they realize how dangerous that is. Washington doesn't care if South Korea gets blown up, but some of the South Korean politicians are like, no, this is so. Maybe that they're trying to get rid of some of these holdouts. But anyways, Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's kind of ironic that they're telling us that Georgia and Romania, that these nations just really, really want democracy, and they've been telling us for the last 2 decades that South Korea is a democracy. So maybe it's worth just having a look at what this democracy looks like. And I had quite a deep dive on South Korea this week. 4 of the last 6 presidents have served time in prison. 4 of the last 6. One of them is currently in jail for a sentence over 30 years. Another one was sentenced for 15 years and was pardoned by the recent president, the one who enacted the military coup. One of those ones who I just mentioned, who is doing over 30 years in the clank, her father was a military dictator who got assassinated. He was a military dictator for over a decade. He came into power through a military coup. He was assassinated. The person who replaced him lasted a year. He was replaced by a military coup. And then that guy was a military dictator, including multiple massacres, one of which killed 2,500 people. The Americans at the time said, well, we had no full knowledge of this. It later came out that they did. And they were extremely panicked about anti-American sentiment in South Korea at the time. So my point is that what they call a haven of democracy out there in that region of the world, it doesn't look like a democracy to me. It looks like a bit of a nightmare. And what's happened, this recent martial law, is nothing new for South Korea. It's kind of par for the course if you look at their history. And the reason why I think this is happening with this guy is the opposition just had a landslide victory in the 2024 elections, and most of his own party have deserted him. And from the very beginning, he aligned himself with the military. So he literally moved the presidential office from what they call the Blue House, which is where the president usually lives, to the, I think it's the Ministry of Defense. He literally moved the office to live inside the Ministry of Defense and is aligned himself very close with the army. So now you've got all of these people calling for him to resign. There was 3,000 professors and academics who signed a paper saying you should resign immediately. There was 1 million signatures to impeach him. His own party and president resigned, and he really was like about to be kicked out. But the problem is the other guy, the opposition who's going to replace him if he gets put out, is wanting conciliatory talks with China. So you've got a military guy aligned with the US, very much a pro-NATO guy. He's sent weapons across to Ukraine and said he would support that. And then you've got this other guy who's like, yeah, I kind of think we should be making this a little bit easier. We should move closer to China, still caught the US. So that makes total sense to me that they would try and keep this guy in power. And yeah, I just think all these big chess pieces are moving around the board. All of these things that you said, Georgia, Romania, France, we're seeing them move. And I think they're kind of setting up the situation for the next stage of this, which will be, we called it a while back. It's going to be conflict, sadly. And yeah, we're watching it. We're watching kind of the pre-war, let's call it that.
I think that South Korean thing was close. They literally, I think, from what I read, they were racing. the military was racing to stop Parliament, stopping a quorum in Parliament to vote to lift the martial law. I mean, it was just a race. Now they're memifying that and whatever. And I think it's worth emphasizing that in Georgia, the pro-Western president is saying, no, she will not step down. They won't allow an election, which is exactly, people don't realize that that's what Zelensky did. I mean, maybe y'all's listeners do, but here people think Zelensky is a legitimate president of Ukraine, which he's, I mean, you could say emergency powers, whatever, but this is not democracy. I know I'm not even like a huge fan of democracy necessarily. I'm a huge fan of objective law as per foundational documents, but they're not even doing the democracy thing.
Yeah, and let me just again go back to my screen share here. This is from my paid subscribers analysis. So again, people listening out there, I do this once a week. Great way to support me. And I again, devil's advocate though, Călin Georgescu, who was the guy, the front runner in Romania, who's an apparent anti-globalist. Yuri Roshka, the Moldovan ex-politician who I've had on my podcast, he wrote though, however, and because he's Moldovan, you know, he's right there closer to the region, he's making the case that Călin Georgescu is actually a controlled opposition because the guy worked for the Club of Rome, UN SDG stuff, and he's apparently a Freemason or a defender of Freemasonry. And so Yuri Roshka, the eternal cynic, cyanide-filled dissident, says that, and I could see this as well because we're also seeing this around the world with Trump and other people who are coming in as apparent anti-dissidents, but then continuing to pave the way for the New World Order. And one more thing from the EU, my former president, Ivo Josipovic of Croatia, he called for the United States of Europe. And he wants a more integrated Europe. And I did a quick search. You know, did you know George Washington over 200 years ago said someday,
yes, I did know that. Yeah.
Following the example of the United States of America, there will be a United States of Europe. And then William Fulbright in 1948 wrote an academic piece titled A United States of Europe. And essentially what he goes on to say is that after every single war, nations are united, like different nations are united, and that effectively that is the time basically to work towards federation or regional integration, which I also read as world government, world federation. And my conclusion sort of is the part of the reasons for the Ukraine war is actually, it's not the typical stuff that people often talk about, right? Putin wants to get rid of Nazism in Ukraine and all this denazification, blah, blah, blah. That effectively the West's, one of their top objectives with the Ukraine war is to integrate Europe. So Ukraine is the pretext. You create this chaos of war to further EU integration. Same thing in the Middle East. I've talked about that before. They want to further Middle Eastern integration. And even in Fulbright's 1948 piece, he kind of between the lines alludes to, I beg the question, was one of the purposes of the Cold War actually to drive NATO expansion, which is the one world army, and to drive EU enlargement, because you have to create this enemy in the East, which is then your pretext to further regional integration. So I thought that was interesting. And I don't know if you have any thoughts on that before moving on to Syria.
Just two quickies on that. The Trilateral Commission was the Zbigniew Brzezinski's baby, I guess, of the trilateral. So you get the Europe, you get the North American, you get the Asian, and then you just zip it up. And I know Obama tried to get like a Pacific treaty, economic treaty, didn't really work so well. We didn't go into it. They have it. So that's definitely the way they were going to do it, I think, is first you regionalize, then you do those big regional hegemonies, which is why I think Biden came in and did like a coup in Haiti. That's my opinion, is that he had Moise killed, and Kamala Harris was involved in trying to like bank South America, like poverty banking and stuff like that, to just internationalize the. I think we're really trying to lock in regional hegemony here. a return to that. For it was the Monroe Doctrine or something. I can't remember what it was. And then don't forget, Hayek's last chapter was about world government. So we love Hayek for his libertarian bent, but if you read the last chapter, it's about world
what
government.
did he say about world government?
He said that would be the best way to have peace. I think it was something like that. Yeah. But I don't defend that at all. But if you look at George Washington, I guess George Washington was in right after the Constitution. So we had the Revolutionary War, then we had the Articles of Confederation for 10 years. And I always think every revolution, or at least the French, the Russian, the American, you get your plebes to overturn the government. And then 10 years later, you put in the government you wanted. So we got the Constitution after that. The Articles of Confederation, though, were very loosely confederated. And we were led to believe that the Constitution would be similarly an economic thing more than anything else. So their conception of a united Europe, I think, is kind of what it is, what the EU was promised as an economic bloc, and not now that they're moving towards political thing. I don't think George Washington probably contemplated that for us too, because the Constitution was
I view that it was
pregnant with that. Yeah.
I view that it was a Masonic occult plan since forever to create this fully politically integrated European one system. So.
But Washington, D.C. is full of Masonic symbolism, all the architecture and stuff. So it's hard to deny they didn't have bigger plans. Well, look at the dollar bill with the eyeball on the pyramid.
Agreed. Yeah, and it's funny what you said about Zbigniew Brzezinski. We've all read the Grand Chessboard. That was 1997. And he called it there. He said that Ukraine is going to be the stage of the next major conflict. And I've always wondered, I always wondered, why the hell did they make that country so big? Because let's face it, Ukraine is an artifice of America. It was designed, they just gave this massive landmass, because remember, most of that used to be a part of the Kingdom of Poland,
yep.
And then it was Russia. Well, before that, it was the Kievan Rus, and it changed hands so many times. And then they just created artificially this huge country, and we should call it by its proper name, guys. The Ukraine. It's the Ukraine. They hate it when you say that. But it's
people
the
used to
Ukraine,
yell at
right?
me. Yes.
But yeah, they made this massive artificial country, and I can't help but think they needed that. They understood, and if you read that 1997 text by Zbigniew Brzezinski, you can find it online in a PDF. He literally lays out that eventually Ukraine's going to be the catalyst for the next major conflict, and it's called the Grand Chessboard. And because it spans Europe and Eurasia, it will give America that catalyst to go into the Asian conflict. That will include China and Iran and Russia and this anti-hegemony alliance. So all of this goes back a long time. The crazy thing is we're living through it. We're actually seeing it all now. All of these sleeper cells, right? Because South Korea has been under control since the Korean War. Ukraine's been sat there. And we all thought everything was good, but really what they was doing was just setting everything up for this time that we're living in now. And now we're seeing them all activate. But the big problem is certain elements of that plan are now trying to escape it. Like South Korea, they're saying, wait a minute, we don't want to be a proxy to go to war with China. No, thanks. And then America's having to panic and say, whoa, well, we didn't bank on this. And that's why you're getting these crazy elections and these military coups, and Ukraine, who have just done their 11th extension of the state of emergency that allows them to just suspend all, elections and the media. And my worry, guys, and I'd love to just, before we finish this phone, get your take on it, is it feels like these states of emergency and these martial laws are getting closer and closer to us. We already saw it with Canada, with the truckers' protest, basically enact the Military Powers Act. Now, that's one step down from martial law, but it's essentially what they used in World War I and World War II. So I'm thinking, is this also to get us conditioned to see these things happening, because we're going to be seeing it in our nations, in mainland Europe and potentially America too? Because remember, all this martial law stuff, there's been tons of mainstream media talking about it in the US, about could America go to martial law? I've seen loads of these articles in CNBC, and I'm like, well, that seems a bit predictive programming to me.
I think you nailed it on the head. And early on during COVID, I interviewed a lot of the folks like Robin Monotti and Denis Rancourt. And I think the idea is, again, the goal is world government, totalitarian world government, and the pretexts are interchangeable: health, pandemic, green, climate, war, political domestic unrest. I've also talked to William I. Robinson, who talks about global civil war. So he basically said that the economic system is collapsing globally, and that you're going to see internal unrest, and it's all across the board. And that's why countries are implementing police states. And I think you're right, Mike, that, even here in Mexico, they can declare, like you said, it's coming closer to us. And many, folks listening, you'll be hearing it. I mean, in Australia, some months ago, they locked down, I think, Alice Springs because of crime. Martial law, hey, because of crime. Hey, there's too many bees. There's an outbreak of bees. Martial law. And so I think that is they're going to use any pretext because they're losing their grip on power, and I think they want to implement the martial law. Then, while that's in, quickly, put in these laws of digital IDs and control systems. That's kind of how I see it.
And Mexico's ripe for it because they can use the cartel excuse and then use their interoperability with U.S. military. And because sometimes you can't get your own people to do it. And that's why I fear the interoperability, continental, cross-border stuff. I think that's a mechanism of making it stick.
It's funny you mentioned that. I don't know if you caught that from my feed, but I just posted there was a Arizona State University. There was a roundtable, U.S.-Mexico Defense and Security Roundtable, just a week or two ago. And one of the summaries, it says, the strong military partnerships between the U.S. and Mexico are continuing to strengthen and grow. U.S. Northcom's relationships with the Mexican armed forces are evolving from ones of cooperation to those of integration. Integrated teams share the same goals, same vision, same values, same mission. Integrated partners are in it for the right reasons together. This integration is at the heart of North American defense. There you go.
Good luck, because you're first.
But I mean, it could be cartel. I could also see them doing the climate thing. Like Mexico City already has a rule, 25 million, whatever people in Mexico City, and you can only drive your car every other day. I will bet money that soon I'm in the second biggest city in Mexico, Guadalajara. I bet you in a year or 2 or 3, 4 or 5, they're going to say here you can only drive your car every other day.
And immigration is a cross-border problem. They make these problems that are naturally cross-border so that they can justify that kind of thing.
Yeah, Scheinbaum just said she's going to ask Trump to send back non-Mexican migrants to their home countries, so they can use these individual issues or just throw them all together. Border crisis, cartels, climate, martial law.
Yeah, and I saw as well that they're doing climate emergency powers too. So we had floods in Europe and they sent the army into military to deal with it. Now, fair enough, it looked really good on the surface. They helped a lot of people out, but they did enact emergency powers for that, which can be used to requisition goods, vehicles, property. They literally allow you to bulldoze property under that emergency powers if they want. So I think we're going to see that too. And I saw in Wales, all of a sudden, I don't know if I can share my screen, Hervoy, with this, but all of a sudden they started putting up these little green lights everywhere. I'm just going to share it on the screen for those who are looking with videos. They're putting these things up on lampposts and it's green. It can turn green, amber, red, or purple. So low, moderate, high, or very high. And this is going to tell people if it's safe to go out because of pollution levels. So these lights are all over the city, but I can imagine they would turn them into an emergency light for anything. So imagine the terror if you go outside and all of a sudden these lampposts are flashing red lights and you're like, oh my God, get inside the house. Like, I think they're setting people up. And yeah, it's looking to me like the state and the apparatus is almost creeping in through your windows now. They're trying to get as close to us as possible. And one final thing is last year, we got a lot of emergency test alerts on our phones saying, this is just a test alert. You don't have to do anything. But, it would send off an alarm. It would flash a text message and you had to click it to say that you'd seen it. So we got rid of that stuff. You can get rid of it, by the way, listeners. But I don't know. It just feels like they're setting up a lot of emergencies, potential emergencies, and it's not looking good.
The danger there is, though, they're going to legislate now. Like I said, there's a green police, like the transit police in Mexico City. If your license plate doesn't have the correct ending to be driving that day, you're going to get ticketed. If you go out with in Spain, I read that there were the police saying you can't drive your car because of the consequence of the Valencia floods. And so, they'll do all these different with the cameras now. And so if you leave with your car, you'll get ticketed to oblivion. And so, and maybe before going, we're going to talk about some economic stuff as well, like meme coins and Bitcoin, just Syria. One more point here. Where is it? This story was wild. So the Times of Israel, Dan Ehrlich wrote a blog December 4th, Lebensraum needed for Israel's exploding population. You go to the website, 404. It seems we can't find what you're looking for. Times of Israel took it down, but don't worry. We have the archive, archive.today, or Internet Archive, has saved the piece. And Mr. Dan Ehrlich, that sounds like a German last name, I think, says Israel's population is projected to grow to 11.1 million by 2030, 13.2 million by 2040, and 15 million by 2048. That's why hanging on to the West Bank is such a contentious issue. Lebensraum, which again was Hitler's argument for living space. That's what it means, where he wanted to get rid of the Slavs. For all of those folks listening that in my last podcast were complaining, saying I'm on the wrong side of history, that Hitler is a good guy and the Jews are bad. I'm sorry, no, he wanted living space to get rid of me, my forefathers, my Slavs. There's even a Croatian guy who's saying I'm on the wrong side of history. No.
My wife's grandma was slave labor at the age of 4 for the Nazis. Slave labor at 4, building a road. So, the revisionist history sometimes goes a little bit too far, in my opinion.
Yeah, and so, Lebensraum was the Germans wanted living space to expand Germany to the east. So take Russia, whatever countries, neighbors to its east. And so I just found this interesting that, again, this is what Israel is doing for itself in West Bank and now, Syria and Lebanon. And of course, Syria, that's what's going on. You've got Turkey, Erdogan openly saying, yeah, we want a cut of Syria. Israel is also helping I'll call them the hellhounds, the Islamic Salafist Takfiri mercenaries, as is the U.S. And so basically, and we had NATO, Mr. Bilderberger's new NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte meet with Erdogan. Isn't that interesting? Like a week ago. And so that's kind of telling. So your guys' thoughts on Syria. It's the timing again is interesting.
Yeah, I'm not too qualified to discuss that. Besides what we've discussed in the past, I've got a basic understanding of it. But like you said, I think it just links into everything else that we're seeing, and it's almost like all of this one day I expect it's like a patchwork quilt that all of a sudden will merge together, and it'll be like, wow, it's all a part of this poly crisis.
There was definitely some foreshadowing of once Gaza expanded into Lebanon, which they're not calling Lebanon here, they're calling it Hezbollah. They're saying like their incursion into Hezbollah territory. But there was a lot of foreshadowing that it would enter Syria, that it would involve also Iraq and Iran. So I feel like this is all moving forward. We know that the so-called Syrian rebels who are Al-Qaeda linked obviously come from us. I mean, there's I don't know if you guys saw this in 2012 from the Levant report, I think it was called, when Michael Flynn was running the Defense Intelligence Agency. He had that memo that said, we need something like an Islamic State on the border between Syria and Iraq to justify going into Syria. So this has always been our stuff. And I wonder what you guys think. The more this proceeds like this, and the more I think about how Netanyahu is basically an undemocratic, their head there also, I think, after the elections and all that. I mean, do you agree? I mean, I get the sense that it's the US, UK behind this, and that it's not the tail wagging the dog of Israel telling us what to do, but it's just, or maybe it's just the international elite. But you guys have who do you think is running this?
It's funny you said that, because in my analysis earlier this week for my paid subscribers, I actually said it's not clear for me whether the dog is wagging the tail, right, or the tail's wagging the dog when it comes to there's these different factions. And just going to share my screen for a second again. there was this map of Turkey. I guess a Turkish commentator said this is what Turkey is eyeing. So there are neo-Ottoman aspirations
Yes.
for Turkey.
That's what I was thinking. Neo-Ottoman, yes.
Israel has the Greater Israel Plan. So again, there are different oligarchic interests in the British, and then China is entering the fray. China has backed Assad's regime, and I thought I'd also mention it's so funny that this Sunday at church, one of the readings was from Isaiah. We're reading through every week Isaiah, the book of Isaiah, and it was Isaiah 17, literally this Sunday, right when all this chaos started. And it's a prophecy. It says, an oracle concerning Damascus, behold, Damascus will cease to be a city and will become a heap of ruins. And I often think of dual fulfillment in prophecy, where that was fulfilled when Damascus was sacked, I think, by the Syrians way back when. But if you read the prophecy, there are elements that can be read that it wasn't fully completed, because it talks about that's when man will finally, look to his maker. And look what's happening now. So often prophecy will be, yes, it'll be fulfilled initially. And then it will, in the end times, have a much fuller totality of completion. So I thought that was interesting. And yeah.
Two other quick things. I put in the chat a picture. Maybe you remember this map, another trip down memory lane of the greater Middle East that Condoleezza Rice actually copyrighted. And it definitely takes a chunk off of Syria, but it gives it to the Kurds, which I'm sure is not Turkey's plan. And I wanted to mention that Georgia has that little Ajara, what's it called? There's a little kind of used to try to be its own country under Shevardnadze, but then Saakashvili, whatever.
South Ossetia, or
I don't know if it's the same thing, but it's a port where basically all the Central Asian oil goes in and out, and Georgia basically absorbed it when Saakashvili came to power. And I wondered if that had something to do with the importance of Georgia now, if the Central Asian oil, is peaking or something like that. But Ajara, I think it's Adjara.
But by the way, speaking of these maps for people who don't know, first there was a map. Let me see if I can look it up. Well, it's Bernard Lewis. If people just type in Bernard.
Oh, yes. He did the Clash of Civilizations.
1979, he was CFR. I think it may have been Bilderberg. And it was a map that was eerily similar to this, where in his map, it was basically similar. Iraq was broken into pieces. It said South Sudan and North Sudan. And then this map, it says, is from Ralph Peters. I actually learned about this in my grad studies, where my professor said that this came out in, I think, like an Air Force journal or some military journal in the early 2000s. I also heard that it may have been part of a NATO war game map. So, but basically it tells you, CFR, Bilderberg, NATO, that this has been sort of their running idea for, the future.
Yes, and Bernard Lewis was responsible for the Clash of Civilizations that I think Samuel Huntington also picked up on. And I felt like they, and eventually Brzezinski, or I don't know, hand in hand, created this 21st century dialectic of the Western world versus Islam in order to justify this restructuring and even possibly have the synthesis, the thesis, the antithesis, synthesis, the dialectic between the West and Islam as justifying a moral law incorporated into civil law, but secular. So like mask wearing is like veil wearing, but it's secular. I just feel like they like that, the fact that, you could have this respect for Sharia law in a billion people. If you merge that with Europe, you can say, okay, we'll acknowledge your morality, your hierarchy. I think they're doing that here too with the Catholic integralism and stuff. They want us to want a hierarchy and to incorporate moral strictures into civil law. And I feel like those guys are the ones who set up that 21st century dialectic to be, a battle between the West and Islam.
Yeah, and it's a two-way street as well, because if you look at where all of the biggest boxing events are held now, it used to, I'm a huge boxing fan, it used to always be Las Vegas, Madison Square Garden, the Garden, it was the place to be. Now it's all in Dubai, Saudi Arabia. That is where they're putting all of the big fights. So you can see there's this cultural merging, and all of the biggest events are being held in a country that was not known for its sports. It was, the US. So you can see we're taking parts of their culture, they're taking parts of our culture, and it's almost like the conditioning for that merge. But my caveat is I think there's going to be huge civil conflict before that happens. I think all of the migrants that have been put into European nations, we know it's already had huge consequences, but that's speeding up. So once that tipping point is reached in Europe, that's not going to be let's all shake hands and share each other's foods. It's going to be, it's going to be no fun to be around. So unfortunately, I think they're setting up for that transition, but it's not going to be for some years before it does happen. It'll be conflict first.
And just real quick, I found the map of Bernard Lewis for people that are watching, not listening. I think it's 1979. And you see northern
very
Sudanese,
similar,
northern Sudanese rump state. Iraq is broken up into Shia Sunni. Syria has expanded, which is strange. Iran is broken up. Of course, that's the big one, into Turkmenistan and Arabistan. That's rather odd. But Baluchistan, literally like a week or two ago, one of these puppet, Baluchi dudes, Free Baluchistan NGO, which clearly financed by a national endowment and all that. He actually said, there was a meeting. He was calling for Free Baluchistan, which means chopping off a part of Iran and I think Pakistan. And he actually said we need to have a NATO pact. Again, there, it's very clear. And I think way back when there was in the U.S. Congress, there had been a bill which Hillary Clinton may have been linked to push again for a free Baluchistan. And I forget my other point here that this is basically again part of their idea. And this is actually, I used to have an old blog. People can still go there, governancearchive.wordpress.com, and where I've saved some of these maps, which are harder to find now. And I did this while I was teaching, and last time I updated it was 2015. So, but basically where I would post news that were strictly related, from the official credible sources from world government news, sort of tracking our move toward world government, so people can, if they're interested, they can check on that. But
that's pretty cool.
I actually had a website as well that, anyways, it's similar. It got a lot of views, but I couldn't keep up with it because I was teaching full time. But let's go to Bitcoin, shall we? What do you think? Meme coins, Bitcoin. I'll just run through my quick Twitter shots here, and you guys can comment. I'm just increasingly now, my thesis has not changed from the beginning. I view that Bitcoin was created by the globalists for the purpose of pushing us into this CBDC cashless system. And honestly, I feel like the evidence is now here. Martin Armstrong, who I've interviewed at least 3 times, he recently wrote that there's no question that the blockchain code was developed in the intelligence community. Has Bitcoin been manipulated more to make people think digital currencies are better than paper? There's a strong probability of that. If I give you a $100 bill, they do not know where I got it from. If I pay you in Bitcoin, they can trace it to everyone who has ever handled it. This is a control system. Spiros Kouras says, you really think that central banks would allow something outside of their control to threaten their monopoly? The coming digital financial system is the new and improved beast system of control. An anti-establishment ideology brought to you by the deep state. Darth Powell on X says Bitcoin is the centrally controlled manipulation Ponzi scheme. 1.94% of total addresses hold 92.73% of Bitcoin. Sure, there are some exchanges, but best case is 2% control 70% of Bitcoin. Eric Young on X is a great account to follow. He says Bitcoin is the perfect liquidity sink invented by the deep state intelligence apparatus. He also posted this comment that says, you are what they refer to as the useful idiots. Crypto is the biggest psyop in human history. They knew people would eventually fear inflation and then abandon fiat money, so they created an alternative that would help absorb the capital flight, but do nothing to harm the system. That something is crypto. Remember the motto, you'll own nothing and you will be happy. Every immaterial fiat dollar you exchange for immaterial crypto is wasted ammunition you could have used to fight the banking cartel. They don't want you to own gold, silver, oil, farmland. They want you to own nothing, crypto, NFTs, and live in the metaverse. You're literally further engulfing yourself in the matrix. Unplug yourself and become a commodities Chad. And Catherine Austin Fitz recently talked about plunder capitalism, where she thinks it's a pump and dump, where the government's going to buy up Bitcoin, raise the price in Bitcoin, and then at some point do a swap where they're going to get rid of that, dump that Bitcoin, buy real assets, and then the price of Bitcoin will fall, and then everyone will lose their what they're holding on to. And Odd Man Out says, Larry Fink says the global digital currency will stop all money laundering. Moneyed interests have always been behind the drive for globalism. Recently, David Sachs was named as the crypto czar. He was PayPal mafia. He said PayPal's goal was to become a world currency. And there was a recent video talking about how Ripple, the PayPal mafia, was also behind Ripple, perhaps, which is now the third. So you've got Bitcoin, Ethereum, and now XRP is the third market cap, and Bitcoin, and its price is rising. And
let me just share my screen on that one when you finish.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, that was sort of my thing there, right? I think the evidence is piling in that it wasn't a scam, and yeah.
So what you can see in this screen here is that Tether alone, that's just one stable coin. They now account for 98 billion in terms of treasury holdings, which would make them the third largest money market fund if there was one, but they're not. They're a shitcoin that's supposed to be backed by the US dollar. They've never been audited. They're now holding 98 billion of US treasuries, and they are the fastest accumulator of US treasuries in history. And if you on a list of nations, they are now 18th as a nation, but it's a shitcoin in terms of US Treasury holdings, and they're set to go to being one of the top US Treasury holders in the world. Now, the reason all of this is important is because if you look into Tether, if you do your due diligence, you'll find out there's been a lot of studies on them showing that when they create these Tether tokens and they create them by the billion, they buy Bitcoin with it and they push up the Bitcoin price. As the Bitcoin price goes up, they then cycle it back into dollars. Then with those dollars, they buy US Treasuries. So when people like Eric Young are saying it's a debt sponge, this is what they're talking about. Now, here's the crazy bit. Guess who is the custodian of all these treasuries? Howard Lutnick, Donald Trump's Secretary of Commerce. So Howard Lutnick at Davos, no less, this year was filmed speaking to Bloomberg, and he said, "Oh, Tether's fine. Don't worry. They've definitely got the reserves. Even though they've never been audited and they never will be, don't worry, you can trust them." And of course, he's completely compromised. So when all of these people you speak to, and listen, guys, I get it. You all want to make money. It's fantastic. But whenever I discuss Bitcoin, I get a host of people saying, "Mike, you don't get it. You don't understand. You can't beat math. Have fun staying poor." All of this stuff. And I'm like, well, I'm kind of happy. Don't worry. I'm not struggling. My point, though, is there is something else at play. And if you bury your head in the sand on this one, it's really a bad idea, because my guess is they don't want you all to get out of this rich. My guess is they're taking you towards CBDCs. And really, all of that crypto space, this is how I understand it. Not just Bitcoin, although Bitcoin really is it's like the front man of a band, right? You need a good front man. It needs to be sexy. It needs to look good. But then you've got all the other crypto infrastructure, this like kind of ecosystem. And all of those ledgers, all of those assets, all of that flow of capital across this network, that's CBDC light. That has built the CBDC infrastructure. And one day, very soon, they're just going to flick a switch. And all of those things that you thought were for sovereignty and freedom, you're going to find out were completely designed to build out CBDCs without you realizing it, and to get you to cheer it on, and also to get you to be that willing participant. And if you look at XRP, which is one you just mentioned, Tavoy, they literally are used right now in 9 central bank digital currency trials. There are 9 trials going on using Ripple and the XRP base layer as their trial. And people are investing in this. They're saying, "Mike, are you buying Ripple and XRP?" I'm like, "Are you crazy? Like, that's like investing in Pfizer stock." I mean, come on, you've got to have some ethics and morality here. So, yeah, I think people have been took for fools on this one. And listen, it was a great strategy because it got you to go along with your own enslavement. But Unless you're speculating to try and raise some money, I think you just have to open your eyes to the fact that there is no way on planet Earth that they would push something that's there for your freedom, sovereignty, and is going to make you rich. That's not the plan for us. The plan, of course, is to put us into their technocracy. So, do with that what you like. It's not about people being jealous. It's about people just taking a step back and saying, look, guys, there's some red flags, pretty huge ones.
I wonder, I had a thought, why Lutnick in commerce? And is it possible that they want to make sure that people, like businesses, adopt it, and there's clear the highway for that? Could that be part of it?
Absolutely. The stage that they're at now, I call it the final stage of CBDC Lite, because what they now need to do, they've got all of the people participating, they've got all the infrastructure in place, and they've had, let's say, 15 years of testing it. Now what they need to do is integrate it with commerce, because as it's being used at the minute, it's being used for people to do meme coins. And, we've had Hawk to a coin. That was a coin recently. It went up to, I think it went up to was it 100 million in a few hours? Then she pulled the rug on the audience. And apparently she took 50 million out of that coin. But we'll come back to meme coins. I'm going to hand that to you.
Yeah,
to come back
I want to hear that.
But so what I think they're going to do now is they're going to start to draw in all of the mainstream financial institutions. And I just wanted to share this one more graphic, Roy, because I think this one really lays out what the next stage of the plan is. This is all their own words, by the way. I'll just share my screen one more time. Whoops, where are we? Oh, are you on? Am I sharing?
No,
I'm not seeing it.
Okay, expand that. Yeah, so this is some of the stuff that
I don't see anything.
We don't see it.
Okay, it's loading.
There it is.
Yeah, so this is some of the stuff that the key players have said. So BlackRock chief Larry Fink sees crypto ETFs as a stepping stone to tokenization. Now, the plan with tokenization is to give you tokenized assets, meaning that even real assets, like, for example, Roy, let's imagine you've got a few ounces of gold squirreled away. They want to tokenize that and put it on the blockchain so that they have control over physical assets and they can actually trade it back and forth without you knowing. So let's say we go to a technocracy and you say something that they don't like, they can automatically put a fine on your digital identity. And if you don't pay it, they can literally take digital shares from your tokenized asset. And then somebody can turn up at your door and say, I'm sorry, buddy. You didn't pay your fine. I'm taking it. Now, the crazy thing is Larry Fink also said, we're going to tokenize everything, including human beings. He's quoted as saying that. So that means you'll be tokenized and put on the blockchain. Now, let's imagine we have another 2020 incident. They were actually moving people around who worked for Amazon to different parts of the country without, they said, listen, it's an emergency. We're going to use you where you need to be used. Well, this is what the WEF called human capital. Like, you are capital. And if you want to feed yourself, if you want your UBI or whatever it is, then they're going to literally move you around in this digital world. And then you'll have to go and turn up at those places. But I'm getting beyond myself. I'm just going to give you a few more of these headlines. Digital assets, complete collateral tokenization plan. Peter Thiel, almost everybody, every tech CEO I know shifted right. We know that's happened, but that's going to be a key part of the technocracy. Then there's the T-bills that I mentioned. So they're turning Bitcoin and Tether and all the other stable coins into a big debt sponge. And this is the other one for the people who are like, no, Donald Trump was taken out by BlackRock, or they tried to. This is just to remind you that Donald Trump and Larry Fink are really close. There was a meeting at the White House in 2017, and it says Trump immediately pointed out Fink. He said, I see we have Larry Fink here. Where is Larry Fink? When he spotted the money manager in the crowd, Trump remarked, Larry did a great job for me. He managed a lot of my money. I have to tell you, he got me great returns. So, you can see it. It's all happening. All of the technocracy is now coming through the private sector. All of those people are going to be put in positions of power. And cryptos and Bitcoin are a huge part of that. And if you don't see it, it's our willing blindness, in my opinion.
I think you explained it really well. And for the first time, some things came together in my mind. And you explained, I guess I was thinking, if I have some gold in my house, First of all, I wonder how they'd be able to tokenize. Like they don't know that I have it, but let's say they do tokenize it. I get fined for eating too many steaks or something, and I guess it's like, what do they call those, repo men or something, bounty hunters? There's something. They come to your house and repossession the gold, or like, this is total slavery. So then people, like, we will be. I was just thinking, what would happen if I was forced to like go work as a slave laborer? I'm like, I'm just gonna die of a hunger strike. Like, honestly, I'm not gonna play this game. I'm gonna die on my own terms. I don't care. You know, it's crazy.
Okay, so just one more final thing. European Commission investigates the idea of an EU asset registry, and it says here the tender aims at exploring how to collect and link information available from various sources of asset ownership, land registries, company registries, trusts and foundations, central depositories, and analyze the data scope and challenges for such an EU registry. The possibility to include in the registry data related to the ownership of other assets such as cryptocurrencies, works of art, real estate, and gold shall be considered. So that's the plan, is for them to literally, when you make any purchase, they'll put it straight into the asset registry. And at that point, they will tokenize it, and now they can come and swoop in and try and take your physical assets at any point. And they're already exploring it, and there's calls for a global asset registry too. There's some NGOs that are really pushing for that, and they're saying it's to tackle tax evasion. And I'm like, we know who the tax evaders are. We've got the Panama Papers, we've got the Sunshine Papers. Just go online. That's your tax evaders. But of course, they're not talking about those guys. They're talking about people who have a few $100K that they've spent their entire life working for, and now they want to loot. So, again, just going back to what we said, if you want to be protected, what's the easiest thing for them to come for? The digital assets that you've willingly put yourself into, the stuff on the blockchain where they can literally trace that blockchain using analytics, or the stuff outside the system that they've never seen. You can see why they would prefer the digital assets, because if they're going to that system, I don't think it's going to be hard for them to figure out who bought some Bitcoin 3 years ago. They've got fantastic triangulation and analytics, whereas if I went into a forest and said, Monica, here's an ounce of silver, it's completely private, right? No one's going to see that.
I have a lot of quick hits coming out of what you're saying. If I can just rattle them off, you good? So one thing is, they could say you don't have property rights if you don't register your assets. So even without confiscating it, you could, get inside your head like that. We can't defend it if we don't know it's yours. That's why you would register it. The gold was illegal here for a while after, I think, FDR made it illegal. And if you were to pop up with some coins that were supposed to be confiscated at the time, I think there is retribution, or consequences even now. I don't think your lives were like, hey, this was great. I guess you could melt it down, which would be fine. But as the coin, it would be so much more valuable, I think. Larry Fink, if you look into his history, have you guys ever seen this? Like, I believe he was pretty much a failure. So I don't think that he had any savvy about managing. He's purely political actor, in my opinion. And you can look at Trump, and he went bankrupt 4 times too. So if Fink was making Trump money, my guess is it wasn't from just, pure investing prowess. I don't know if you guys have thought of looked into natural asset companies at all. Courtney Turner talks about it. Ice Age Farmer used to talk about it, where I don't know if that's the one where it's like every single thing down to, like, if you see your tomatoes, my tomatoes have little barcodes on them. And it would be like that. Every single solitary thing is commoditized. I don't know. I have a couple more things, but if you want to comment on that.
Even just on that, I remember a story from Croatian newspaper some years ago. I forget, an Ice Age Farmer and others mentioned that. I forget what it was that they would put in, like, every single item, like a sock, a salmon. And the Croatian paper was talking about, right, even slices of salmon they would put. I forget what it was. It was like a really minute, I don't know, it was RFID or something. But
this is really interesting. Sorry, continue. I thought you.
But that's how they would be able to know every single item, like food, objects.
Could everything. Be a radiation thing, like luciferase or whatever, the illuminating ink that I think Gates has a.
My wife was literally listening to your episode, Roy, in the kitchen about 2 hours ago with Ice Age Farmer. And she said, Mike, have you heard this one? I said, no. She said, oh, it's fantastic. And
When? From when?
That was ages ago. So years
Yeah,
back.
because Ice Age Farmer's been out of pocket. Where has anyone heard from him in years?
I think he's doing well. I've heard from him on message in Telegram maybe like a year or two ago, but I didn't ask him why he disappeared, but he just, I guess.
I could get, I mean, why not? Like, he's probably like, I'm done.
2020. But anyways, apparently on that one, you discuss that they're going to actually put food production on the blockchain. So they want to know where all of the food's being produced at all times. Again, like, this whole, like, we're going to look back on this whole past 15 years and our great-grandchildren are going to be like, what the hell was you guys thinking when you willingly adopted the blockchain and the digital asset? Like, were you seriously that dumb? I think that's what they're going to say about us, sadly. And I don't know, maybe there's some credibility to that. I mean, I understand that there's like, we could have some, some of these assets will be used for privacy. Bitcoin can be held privately. I think Gabriel Custodian does a course actually on his website. I love him, yeah. He's a great guy, yeah. And he's doing a private custody one. And I understand that technology has to move forward, right? Like, I'm a Luddite. I admit it. I'm total Luddite. I love being a Luddite. I don't want technology. But yeah, I understand that. But I do think like haphazardly adopting this stuff really fast was probably part of the plan.
So just a few more quick things. If you look at, I was reading into the food security stuff on the World Economic Forum website a long time ago, and it talked about getting farmers apps. They had to have apps, and they blamed the supply chain issues. And then when I was in Vietnam, I mean, these people were, like I told you, three of us had breakfast for $1.30, and all these people had cell phones. So they're all farmers basically. So what you're saying about getting that food supply on there, absolutely, they're digitizing it already. And I think the way they do a backdoor into RFIDs or physical chips or whatever is they have you just do it on your phone. Make sure that your phone's in your pocket. You enter it yourself. It gets you in the grid probably 90% the way there. Another thing that happened to me, I one time went to pay my taxes, and I paid my taxes with a check, and the government had already taken the entire amount out of my bank account without my consent. So I had a huge deficit, and it took months for them to reimburse me. I really had to scramble because my checks were all bouncing because but they took, I was unaware that they could do that. They have your account number. So never give them a check with I don't know how to even get around it, but so they're already doing it where they can just take your stuff without your consent or even knowledge. And the last two things I will say is one of the many, many little weird details in the United Healthcare CEO, his murder, was that they were trying to trace this guy, and they have like hundreds of pictures of him. We have facial recognition up the wazoo. My son, who has Down syndrome, it's a very kind of flat face and never traveled internationally before. They didn't even ask him for his passport. We walked up and they had already pulled it up just because they had gotten his face. So there's no way I believe this guy is unfound. But one of the problems they said is we traced him to a Starbucks, but he paid cash. So we lost the trail. And this is the last thing I want to say. Do you think, as I do, that Dogecoin presaged the Doge thing? It wasn't backwards. It's that they set it up. And the Doge, Department of Government Efficiency, is as Hitlerian a sounding thing as I can imagine. And of course, I just thought they saw it. They were setting this up a long time ago.
1,000%. For me, it's like everything is going perfectly according to script. As I said, like my day one thesis of Bitcoin was created by them. And then you see the predictive programming, whatever you want to call it, with Doge meme, Dogecoin. And now Doge, I did a 2-hour great podcast with Peter Duke where he talks about Doge. He goes through the history of Doge, and it's just like, it's so perfectly scripted. Yeah. And just on that note, if I could just share just one last note on technocracy. This is a great website. He's Christian as well. Truthunmuted.org. And he just published, Zero Hedge picked this up, Technocracy Rising Part 1, Why It's Crucial to Understand the End Game. Fantastic article, and I'm just going to read real quick. He says, regardless of one's comprehension of technocratic plans, a monumental reshaping of governments, economies, and societies is occurring, but not by elected representatives, constitutions, creeds, or the will of the people. Power is now concentrated in the hands of an exclusive class of scientists, technologists, engineers, and technicians, many of whom also happen to head multi-billion-dollar corporations. And of course, it's all these people we're talking about, the Trumps, the Ramaswamis, the RFK Jr., Vance, Tucker, Musk, Gabbard. And he goes down here to say, why is technocracy rising now? Technocracy has long been resisted by traditional powers and originally conceived only for the North American continent, the technate, right? And today, technocracy is rising from the ashes like the Phoenix legend to become a global force to be reckoned with. And basically, he says, by adopting it, the banking elite not only can retain control over the monetary system, they will also cement their rule over all industries, natural resources, governments, institutions, and people. So he does an excellent job summarizing stuff there. Any other thoughts?
What was it that I was? No, I've completely lost my thought. I did have one, but I'll hand it to Monica.
Have you spoken to that? Have you interviewed that author?
No, I haven't seen him do like a podcast, just writing. I haven't really reached out, but yeah.
That's one thing that I wanted to mention actually was I think logic works really well on this one. Like, when in history has something that was going to save us being so pushed by the establishment? I'm talking like, go on Amazon. There's like hundreds of bestsellers with millions of copies. And then I saw just recently in Las Vegas, like one of the casinos lit up and turned into a giant orange Bitcoin. And even the psychology of it, right? The psychology is so cleverly constructed. Have fun staying poor. You know, it's this kind of aggressive, narcissistic, egotistical attitude. And yet on the other side of it, there was like, they have this like schizophrenic view. So on the other side of it, it's like, no, sovereignty, freedom, guys, we're all in this together. And then it's like, have fun staying poor. And it's just so weird. And like, you know, if you can't see through that, I think, you know, in a few years, you probably will.
Like, can I throw out a like super philosophical question? If I'm so entrenched in libertarian thought. My father was like, what I guess you'd call a classical liberal. And it's hard for me. And I read the stuff like Hayek, and you can't help but notice that giving up on your nation state might have been a setup. I don't know. But this idea of like, I guess it's the labor theory of value, which is totally Marxist. But I have this book, a Catholic book about the libertarianism and the church. And I talked to a priest once. It's like, I invest. Sometimes I make these investments, and if I lose money, like things I think are going to go up and they don't, I get really bummed. Like I feel bad ego wise. And he said that, I said, you know, what should I do? He's like, don't do that. He said, that's the sin of sloth. He said, the value, labor is the source of all value, which sounds very Marxist. And this guy is absolutely not a Marxist. And it's just something I don't know enough about. I can't reconcile it in my head. But the reason it made me think of that is this idea of getting super rich just simply from gambling. And obviously, when that's happening, it's for sure coming out of somebody's pocket. But do you think there's something wrong with it? Is it fine? Like, and I'm not trying. I know what libertarian dogma is, and I'm generally very dogmatic. But I'm just curious to explore that philosophical question for a second.
I just felt like what Mike said. I've been thinking about that as well, and it just in this moment of history, like when it ties into what you're saying, Monica, it doesn't make sense. Like just all these people, like you're literally doing nothing, punching a few things, and you're making millions. And I mean, good on them. And I'm of the view that if you are able to, we're in this moment in time, and if you can just not, you know, if you were smart enough to buy Bitcoins or XRPs or whatever, and make a whole pile and then transition out and then buy farmland, more, you know, I'll put more power.
Absolutely, yeah.
To you is my view. I'm not as strict as Mike there, because again, we're using DARPA internet, we're using CIA, Google GPS, we're using Federal Reserve, globalist fiat currencies, whatever country you're living in. So it's just like for anyone to say, oh, if you buy Bitcoin, you're supporting the system. It's just like, then why aren't you living in the Amazon where you made a hut from your own, you know, it's like the whole Alison McDowell thing where she goes to an extreme, like she blocked me, called me, I've interviewed her and she called me dumb. She's like for no reason, just kind of, oh, you're helping support the system. Well, you live in a, you know, but my point to Michael, what Mike was saying is just so obvious. Like you're never going to have, when the system is promoting something so in your face, then it was part of the plan all along, in my opinion. And you had the situation with Roger Ver. I bought his book, Hijacking Bitcoin. I haven't read it yet. But, you know, apparently he gave up his citizenship correctly in 2014. It's been 10 years. And they just arrested him, even though he wasn't a U.S. citizen. And apparently he filed his taxes correctly. And even though he did everything by the book, it's almost like they're making him to be a new Julian Assange. And this is another thing. I don't know what you guys think. I think a lot of these Snowdens and Julian Assanges are concocted by the system.
They're both fake. They're definitely both fake.
Right.
Ross Ulbricht isn't, but those two are.
Right, but they are like system-approved dissidents, kind of like in 1984, where they create 2 minutes of hate, but it almost feels like now it's Roger Ver's turn to be made the next iteration of Snowden was surveillance, Assange was the deep state, and now since we're going into the CBDC digital world, Roger Ver will be the Julian Assange of. I don't know if you had that thought. I'm not saying he's like a bad guy or anything, Roger Ver, but it just almost seems like the guy gave up his citizenship, he paid his taxes, and now he was in Spain. It doesn't matter. We're just going to now take him, and he's going to be the new poster boy. I don't know.
Could be, yeah, another one of those big names. And going back to what you said, Monica, I think we're on a zeitgeist kind of thing. I just released a 1 hour newsletter, and it was the first time I've ever really discussed ethics and investing. And it was brought on by all of this discussion. And like you, Roy, I've got nothing against Bitcoin. I know loads of people that bought Bitcoin and earned good money. I've got friends, and I accept payments in Bitcoin from people. Like, what's the difference? It's dollars. It's, if it gives you cheaper fees or whatever. I'm not vehemently against Bitcoin. Just because you point out the contradictions in it, that doesn't mean you can't speculate in it. And people always assume that I've never bought Bitcoin or earned money off it. It's like, how do you know? I actually own Bitcoin at $100, by the way, but that's another story. But
do you really?
Yeah, now? I did. Yeah.
You did. See, that's the thing. Who could ever hold it from 100 to 100,000? Who would ever hold that? Like, who has the money to be like, wow, that thing is like really? I need a car.
I can tell you, I never sold it, but I also don't know where it is. So that's another story. But I actually did a whole newsletter on ethics around investing, and because I wasn't an investor back then, by the way, Monica. Like, I was literally just like a young and stupid and just messing around, and I ended up buying a few $100 worth. But yeah, I did one around ethics. It's on my Substack in the paid section. It's also on my Patreon. But it was the first time ever that I actually discussed what you guys mentioned before the show, which is like my father's passed. My dad was a gangster, and he got put in prison for smuggling $20 million worth of cannabis to the UK. So it was like a huge thing. It was the largest in history at the time to the UK. And I don't know, today it might be even more than that. Probably like inflation adjusted, who knows? But I was talking about that and how when I grew up, that money terrified me because I saw what it did to my family and all of the consequences. And when I went to university and studied theology, like right livelihood was a Buddhist concept. And that was really something that I took to heart. And that's why I went on to be a social worker and not an investment banker, or, I didn't pursue the money. So when I went to investing later on, having already had all of those ethical dilemmas, like for me, it's not about money either. Like, money's great. It helps us. We need wealth. We need to protect it. It's going to give us a cushion. But, I think if you're at the point where you're investing in these things and you're not thinking about the consequences of the technocracy on your children and your grandchildren, you've lost sight of it. You actually have adopted their Luciferianism, which is about money, power, wealth, and materialism, and you're placing that above ethics. That's what they do, right? And my dad, right, he was probably I know he was a good person. And I explore all this in the newsletter, so I won't get into it here. But yeah, if people want to understand, like, listen to my kind of thoughts on that, I really laid out in that one. And I think it's so important. Like, ethics is everything to us. And if you don't have that, you're done for.
If you guys want to send me any resources, if you email, I can make like a universal post and at monicaperezshow.com. I share it with you and you can share it with people if you want to give me those links. But yeah, I know that's so interesting that you say that about your father, because of course, I don't think that buying and selling cannabis is immoral. And actually, it's clearly subjective because now it's legal here, and now nobody thinks it's bad. I also don't think it's bad buying these things, profiting from them. I absolutely do not. I will say, I remember I was still an investment banker, so it was more than 20 years ago. Somebody asked me, "Oh, you're a libertarian." I guess it had already been a libertarian thing. You must love Bitcoin. And I said, it just seems like a stepping stone to a cashless society to me, which libertarians like gold, right? We want to go the other way. not that way. And of course, my I forgot to separate my ideology from like, but if it's, maybe I should have done like what Mike did. And
but
you got to find it though.
That's the one that's not really the problem. For me, it's the ones that literally tell you like, we're so proud that we're creating the CBDC system like XRP and stuff. Like those are the ones where I think people have probably gone beyond the pale. You know, with Bitcoin, it's like buying Amazon stock or something. It's not, it's not ethically, we live in a world of duality, right? There's ethical compromises every single day, and we all have to make them for ourselves. Like I would never care or make a decision for someone else, but I know for me, I've got that compass, and like if I do something that I later on reflect on and say, Mike, no, that's wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. That actually pains me to do that. So I have to try and guide myself with that. And I think going forward, we're going to have a lot of these ethical considerations. So now's probably the time to introduce that into our conversations. Not ours literally here, but I'm talking internally, especially around money, right? Because our vote with our money is far more consequential than our vote at the polling station for a candidate. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't matter. That like they're going to select one or the other, and they're already pre-selected. But with your money, we actually are funding these systems, and if we pull our money out, they can't create them. It's not going to work. So that's just my little rant on that one.
Yeah, that's one reason I decided to go into teaching after finishing Geneva at School of Diplomacy, and I didn't want to work in NGOs or United Nations or the State Department because I view it all as part of this satanic liberal globalist blob. And I'm like, there's something I can do where I don't have to sell my soul. And just to have here, I guess another theme that got me this week was the green agenda, the climate agenda, the Soylent Green agenda. You had John Kerry say we're on the brink of needing to declare a climate emergency, which is what we really have. And we need to get people to behave.
That is how he talks, actually.
John Kerry looks like shit.
He looks like...
he's always looked like shit.
Dead man.
Like poop. Walking. Come on, Mike. Let's keep it clean.
But then again, you look at the signals here. This is BBC a week ago. London's 850-year-old food markets to close. And for me, it's like, this is history, man. 850-year-old food market. It's like the meat and seafood market. They're going to close it. It's from 1327, and provides fish to businesses. And the site has now been earmarked to provide thousands of new homes. I wonder if those are going to be the BlackRock homes that you can only rent, that you can't buy and to own. And it says traders would be able to continue their operations until 2028, and then after that, they're on their own. Like there's no food market, and so they're destroying the food market. And then you see this article. This came out the same day. This is November 26th, and then November 26th, and this other website says the food of the future is going to be manufactured in a tank, and people can watch the video where these different companies talk about what they're doing. And then Financial Times, and then when did Financial Times, I don't know the date for this, but this came around the same time. Why biotics are vital for the future of health. But then if you go down, it says, research shows that there are particularly effective benefits in biotic products when they contain a broad range of microbiota. Long-term efforts are underway to advance these products, examining whether the inclusion of certain human strains could help to more effectively reduce the threat of several gastrointestinal illnesses. So basically, it's like, now first they're like, kill the 1,000-year-old food market in London. No more meat, fish, real food. We're going to have lab-created foods, and then transition from lab-created, you're going to have human strains. You're going to be eating other people in your yogurt, and Soylent Green. And then what's after that? They're going to literally be crushing people up in these labs and feeding them back to us. And then if you think it's just in the West, New York Times published 2 days later, November 28th, China is on a quest for the holy grail of meat. Let's hope it succeeds. It says China is serious about achieving breakthroughs in so-called future foods, which include lab-grown, plant-based, and other alternative meats. So that's the food angle. This is from yesterday, BBC. The people growing their own toilet paper. So no more. You can't use any more toilet paper because trees, right? Even forget Bill Gates wants to cut the trees and then bury them. But you're gonna have to be using leaves to wipe your butt. now.
You know, every trail runner who's watching this is nodding their head like, what's wrong with the Leafs?
And then BBC again. Should you pay more for parking if you have a big car? And then Richard Wellings is a great account out of the UK. He says these were BBC journalists. They were taking the bus. It took them 3 hours to get where they needed to go. Where one lady said it normally takes her under an hour using her car to get to the place. It took her 3 hours by bus. And Richard Welling says it took one of these journalists almost 3 hours to get to work by bus. The establishment are planning to force people out of their cars and onto buses, even though bus journeys are generally slow, inconvenient, uncomfortable, and inefficient. And again, that's that. I see this all around us more and more, from here in Mexico and elsewhere, just bringing in these regulations where they want to force us away out of the cars, into the buses, getting rid of access to meat, making it more expensive, blah, blah, blah. So thoughts there.
Have you heard, can I go, Mike? Or do you have something on the tip of your tongue? Have you heard about the UK law? Mike, you probably did hear about this. They're trying to push a law where family farms, which have always been exempted from inheritance taxes, are supposedly going to be taxed at a rate of, I think, 40%. So what's the progression there? The first generation can get a mortgage for 40% easily because that's unmortgaged. But what does the second generation do? And then they're gone. And these are big farms. They're like industrial.
The big problem is the capital gains tax. So if your parents are farmers and you're going to inherit their farm, when your parents die, they will apply capital gains tax. So you've got a farm that's maybe been in the family 3 generations, and on paper, with all that land, it will have been worth not a lot, maybe 150 years ago, but today it could be worth 2 million. Now that sounds like a lot, but it's only money that's trapped in the land. That farmer's not walking around like a millionaire with Gucci handbags.
Absolutely.
Like, that's not happening.
That's right. Yeah.
But then they're going to say to the kids, oh, yeah, well, here's the tax man. You owe us 1.2 million or whatever it's going to be. And the kids don't have that money, so they're forced to sell the farm. And that's how it's going to happen.
And if there is a mortgage on it, then they can't get the mortgage to pay. Because if it had no mortgage, you could get a mortgage for $800,000 and pay that.
Yeah,
first gen.
But you imagine how much, farmers really...
Yeah, and then you'd have to pay that mortgage, right?
There's no way they
You're not going to be able to do it year to year, but
I do think there is a bit of a psyop here too, and it's a bit controversial, but the land in the UK, like 85-90% of it is owned by aristocrat families. So they've got a vested interest in this. So whilst they're giving us this, like, oh, poor old farmer, which does exist, by the way.
Interesting.
I'm a farmer, but who's really going to benefit from changes to that? It's going to be the wealthiest landowners. Now, of course, they can put stuff in trust. And actually, here's a cool little thing that you probably both don't know. When they brought in the land registry in the UK, before that, no land was registered. It was held in paper deeds, in families, passed on. When they brought in the land registry, none of the elites put their land into it. And over 50% of land in the UK is still unregistered, meaning that no one knows who owns it and it's held tightly. Now, the key part of that is there's no asset registry. But for you and your land, you have to pay taxes, you have to pay capital gains, but their land isn't even registered and they pass it on within family intergenerationally and it's never been sold. And it only gets put into the land registry if it's sold. So these guys knew they knew what they was doing even 150 years ago. They were preparing for asset registries and the like. And yeah, what we're seeing now take place digitally has been done many times before, I think.
How do they legally, these wealthy oligarchs, rulers of the world, keep the land? If there must be, like, if you go to some government office, they can pull up a deed and then say, maybe it's a trust, which is just a front, or how does that work?
It's not even registered. Like they claim officially, we have no idea. And what they did was they said, we want you to voluntarily register it. And it was like, no way. Because in the UK, the crown is the only absolute owner of land anyway. So even if you own a piece of land, the actual owner is the king. You're a tenant, legally speaking. And if you died and you didn't have an heir, he would take that land. He gets it and then he sells it. He sells it, right? It's crazy. It's awful.
He sells it, but he still owns it. It's that kind of like that 99-year lease thing in a way.
Yeah.
If he still
but what
owns
they
it.
do is they just keep it. Yeah, they just keep it in the family, pass it on via these. My sister's actually quite high up in property law. Like that's her career. And she says, every year we take a load of property and send it back to the king. I'm like, what? And, to her, she doesn't bat an eyelid because it's so normalized in the UK.
Are there no property taxes? If you're not registered, they can't collect property taxes?
If you're not registered, no. It's like in the US, if you've got a allodial title, and people used to get a allodial title in the US where you paid no property taxes, but they stopped all that.
I've never heard of that, yeah.
Well, it was when the people originally went across from the UK, they were given land patents, these massive patents for land. They were given like 10,000 acres, 20,000, and they gave them these land patents, which meant they never had to pay taxes. Now, that only passed on intergenerationally. So if you ever sold it, the patent got wiped out.
Got it.
So some of them still exist and they're extremely valuable if you've got one because you don't have to pay property taxes. And also they can't just take your land in some kind of,
How do you
confiscation.
How do you spell that?
Patent, like Patents. So just...
Oh, patent. And then allodial? Land. Is that what you said, allodial?
Allodial title is kind of the legal definition of what a land patent gives you. It basically means that you're the absolute owner. There's no one above you. You're number one. Whereas what we've all got, like even in the US, if you buy some land, they can still do, for example, eminent domain in a crisis and say, we need that land, we're taking it. But yeah, those land patents. But then here's a cool part of history to look into. 1933, when the Great Depression hit and we had the big crash, they took loads of farms. Like they were foreclosing on farms, like thousands per day, hundreds of thousands went. And that's when I think they got rid of a lot of these land patents because people would have owned those farms for generations. So anyways, it's a cool, interesting part of history to check out. Yeah.
Really interesting.
I was thinking when you're talking about the appreciation of the farms and even just for my home, like if the price of my home tripled and you're going to think I've made money, it's like I haven't made anything because the wages have stayed the same basically. And if I sell it, I need somewhere to live. If I buy another home, they've all tripled in price too. It's like how I'm going to be taxing that. I'm going to be even poorer because if I buy another property, it's going to be 3 times as expensive. And so it's, yeah.
Yeah, I think if you've got land or like if you want to own land, like now's the time to try and get some and then just don't sell it ever because you probably will never get it back. Like they'll shut the doors on it. Eventually.
Yeah, I agree. Especially that whole BlackRock thing that you were mentioning. They buy it up. That's what Airbnb, I think, was a little bit of a backdoor to, which I loved because I could buy a retirement place before we could afford to buy in LA and I could just rent. I thought it was like the greatest thing ever. And people are saying, no, it's creating this shortage of houses. And anyway, that's a whole nother topic. But I wanted to just say a couple of things about the things that you brought up. I don't know if you know about cellular agriculture where they grow meat on on laundry lines or whatever, racks in the labs. You have to feed it. It emits methane. It doesn't have a mouth, but it grows. It is meat. It grows, but it needs material. Yeah, no, I'm telling you. It sounds so gross.
It sounds like some horror movie. Again, like
and it emits methane.
Meat on racks, and it's like I wonder if it has like lopsided eyes. And
every once in a while, an eyeball pops up, and they're like, "Oh shit, that one has an eye. Cut the eye out." And your thing about Soylent Green reminds me of how true or false. I'm not even actually sure if it's still true, but that they say that the origin of the J&J vaccine lay in an aborted fetus from the 50s and a baby, and that. Some people claimed religious exemption from getting the vaccine because it's either tested on or actually contains these stem cells. I had other reasons in addition to objecting to that. And
that was the one that Trump came out for when they took it off they said, we can't use this anymore. Yeah. He wasn't even a president at the time, but he's really good friends with Woody Johnson, who's heir to the J&J empire.
Wow.
And when they took that one off because it was giving people blowing up,
jokes,
not going to say it because we're going to go on YouTube, but he actually did a publication on his website and said, this is a travesty. The CDC are wrong to take it off the market.
Ooh, wow.
And I was, well, that's the godfather of the...
But I mean, why go out on a limb for that? I mean...
Because he's really good friends with Woody Johnson.
Yeah, but so. I mean, I feel like that was a that ship had sailed. If it got that far where they took it off and actually made the things look not 100% safe, it was bad. But maybe, I don't know. I always think these things are psyops. But I did want to say one thing about the bus article that you put up there, that it takes 3 hours when it would take you an hour in the car. And I view articles like that, they look like they're championing you and your freedom and your car. But what I think they're ultimately used for is say, see, this is a problem. Therefore, we have to revamp the bus system. We have to put a lot of money into that, and we have to make it more attractive to people. And so while I feel good that they're exposing the problems, I feel like they're exposing them so they can give you the solution.
Yeah, to get you out of your car. Yeah, exactly.
They're going to get it out of your car anyway. It's not like you're like, okay, well, let's forget that idea.
I even thought about here in Mexico. Like, I had to drive. It was absolutely insane. Like, that's why I hate leaving my house. Yeah. It depends on the day and the time, but I had to go out, and it was like literally at least an hour and a half. It could be, an hour one way, and then going back, and everything was just because it's holiday seasons, and like everyone is out. Everyone and their mother are out driving, and it is absolutely hot and insane. But I just wonder how they would this. It's still in places like where I am, how they would do this, because people live all over the city. They go to work on the other side of town. How are they going to get rid of the cars?
Oh, well, yeah. It originally was called the digital city and not the 15-minute city. It was before COVID. Nobody was going for it. And they said that the big problem was that employers would not let employees work digitally. And that is the thing. That is the plan. And they will have like the Starbucks will be the digital work cafe, and everybody will go there and work. That's the vision. The original
now that you
thing.
made me think that, I know a lot of people now that I was hanging out with some friends the other week, and they're all still, a lot of them work in IT and stuff, or others, people are finding jobs where they work online, freelancing and other stuff. And I am noticing that they are working from home, or at least 3 or 4 days.
COVID did that on purpose. It was a real reason.
We are seeing this, yeah. Okay.
And taking away parking, where they put tables on the streets and on the curbs and on the sidewalks. That was in the earlier stuff, the digital thing, where they wanted to flip. They said, we want people to walk in the street and use like bicycles on the sidewalks and have no cars. And so I thought surely they didn't plan all of that, but it was all in the digital city thing before COVID. So all those weird, bizarre policies, I think, derived from that. But one other thing I wanted to say is that I think Smithfield is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, meat companies in the world. It's a Chinese company, and that market was Smithfield. So that market is so seminal in the modern food world that it is the name of the biggest here anyway. Smithfield's on everything, and that is how important that market is. It's literally a worldwide icon, and there it goes.
Well, all right, we're slowly winding down. Anything we haven't touched on? We've covered a lot.
What about not yours, Monica, but your recent episode was on the United Healthcare guy, and I that's American Way. I don't know too much about it, but it looks
yes. I haven't seen an update right now, but for today. But as of yesterday, the United Healthcare CEO, it's not the CEO of the parent company, but of the division. He was gunned down at 6:45 in the morning. The guy got there 5 minutes before he did. He came up from Atlanta in a bus. He stayed at a hostel on the Upper West Side, which was kind of far from this place. So I kind of felt like that was foreknowledge. Ran up to the guy. I don't know if he ran up to the guy, but he shot him in the back, shot him in the leg, had a silencer, dropped some bullets that said deny,
delay.
Things that were, delay and depose, which may tie into this guy was meant to go to court and talk about some other issues, insider trading, whatever. And that, so immediately what I found weird about it is they immediately made it about healthcare policy, about coverage. That the ultimate goal here is single payer healthcare. This is just, will be another stepping stone towards that. I'm always suspicious when they have the policy agenda ready to go, and when it's multiple agendas, surveillance, cash, silencers, and a really big one is now corporate people supposedly are going to want to lock down and security, just the way we've been talking about how politicians, presidents, the Trump assassination, alleged assassination attempt, the Slovenian guy, that they are really putting security of these people, they want them in ivory towers for whatever reason. And this is promoting that. I think the guy was it seems to me the guy was killed. And I don't know why, but if he was, my guess is they wanted to assassinate him for some reason, and they used this opportunity to put a lot of policy triggers in place, and that's why I think it would probably be more like a CIA thing than anything else.
I mean, they could have just, as for all the reasons you outlined, he could have been part of their team, and they could have just taken him out as a pretext to deploy facial recognition. It makes me think of Blade Runner when you say all the oligarchs, like in the movie Blade Runner, they're all in these big giant pyramid corporate buildings you can't get close to. And the other thought was maybe it was just someone that was, I don't think this is true, but someone that was disgruntled. I read a story the other day that some health insurance company says they're not going to be paying for anesthesia anymore. And they're all, these insurance companies are all scammers. They don't pay for half the stuff that you pay that they're supposed to pay for. And so, maybe someone's loved one died as a result.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Health insurance, right?
But I don't believe it. I just, that's what they want us to think. But they rolled that out so quickly. And it's so hyper regulated. The feds and the state regulate the crap out of insurance. Obamacare made it impossible for you to get like statutorily sound insurance. Like you can't get, a defined risk pool and limited like what insurance should be, like catastrophic. It shouldn't happen to me. We have 1,000 people that shouldn't get turbo cancer at the age of 30. You should literally pay $1, or you have 10 million people in that risk pool. You pay $1. One person's going to get it. They get the 10 million and you're done. You cannot have statutorily sound insurance here. And so the hoops they jump through, you can hate them, but I would like to see a truly competitive market and totally unregulated health insurance. Healthcare would be a different question, although that should be ultimately unregulated, but you could literally deregulate financial products overnight. And I would say all those problems would go away.
Yeah, I found just now something interesting. It says a former bodyguard for the guy who got killed is in complete disbelief that the CEO didn't have a security detail when he was murdered. Philip Klein, who previously protected the CEO back in the 2000s, admitted he was shocked and baffled over the murder that he didn't have a detail with him. He also admitted that Thompson should have been wearing a vest. So that completely negates...
Really?
That's what it says.
Wow.
That completely negates the narrative they're giving that they need extra security. It's like, well, it sounds like he's had security for since the year 2000 or whenever that security guard's talking about. So if he didn't have his stuff on him and he normally would have, that's pretty weird.
Very interesting.
I'll just bring up these last two topics that y'all had in the notes, which for me, there's not much to talk about. One was the Congress COVID report, which for me is like a whitewash. It's like the Warren Commission is like the 9/11 Commission is like a huge, big nothing burger with the COVID stuff. And then Hunter Biden.
Too late.
Yeah, and Hunter Biden. And they don't even get to like the main point that a lot of us talk about it was all planned, the whole COVID thing, to bring in this digital global tyranny. And then all they talk about is, yes, the lockdowns we realize now were bad. And, it's like, what? Who cares? And then the Hunter Biden stuff, it's like, that was to be expected. Like, what else are you going to say?
The Hunter Biden thing, I have one interesting little tidbit, if you wouldn't mind. The Hunter, so I've done tons and tons and tons of work on the really dirty dealing of the Hunter Biden situation, not taxes and guns and stuff or girls or drugs, that Jim, Joe, and Hunter Biden, and I think Hunter really was non-compos mentis the whole time, were involved in a lot of shady financial deals, influence peddling, all of that kind of stuff. But the way they talk about it, well, Biden pardoned his son, who can blame him, blah, blah, blah. They never talk about what I think is obvious, that Hunter was a beard, that this is all Joe doing it. And And during the time that this stuff was happening, the really serious like Chinese business where they were getting money from the Chinese and influence peddling, which I can absolutely document, that this is the exact time that in court on his gun charges, Hunter was saying, it was proving that he was drug addled, completely out of it, smoking crack, whatever. So here is a text. I got this from the Congressional Record. It's in the Congressional Record because they did an investigation into these guys, which had nothing to do with the guns. And, it's real serious high crimes here. And it says, on July 30th, 2017, Hunter Biden sent a WhatsApp message to Raymond Zhao, a CEFC associate, regarding a $10 million capital payment. So Congress is focusing on this deal because it failed. But Bohai Harvest is a deal that's still in place. It involves John Kerry, Whitey Bulger's nephew. We could do hours on this. I'm not going to get into it. But I just want to say this is supposedly a text that Hunter Biden sent when he was drug-addled, trying to extort $10 million for influence from this guy or get the money that he was promised. Z, please have the director call me, not James or Tony or Jim. Those are all his partners, including Jim Biden. He was cutting them out at this point. I think this is all coming from Joe, but it says Hunter. Have him call me tonight. And it's all caps, bold, underlined. Although you can't do that with a text. I am sitting here with my father, and we would like to understand why the commitment made has not been fulfilled. So my idea is it's Joe's got this phone in his hand. I am very concerned that the chairman has either changed his mind and broken our deal without telling me, or that he is unaware of the promises and assurances that have been made and have not been kept. Tell the director that I would like to resolve this now before it gets out of hand, and now means tonight. And Z, if I get a call or a text from anyone involved in this other than you, Zhang, or the chairman, bold, I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me, meaning Joe, and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. All too often, people mistake kindness for weakness. And all too often, I am standing over top of them saying, I warned you. This is supposedly Hunter threatening these Chinese people, saying that he's sitting next to his father and they're going to use their influence and power to make these people pay if they don't give that $10 million. I mean, this is in the Congressional Record. So what Biden did is he gave Hunter a 10-year, 11-year actually, blanket pardon so that anything he did that he wasn't even charged for, he was not charged with this, he's exonerated from. And that would raise an issue of then Hunter could be possibly have to testify against Joe, but only if they brought Joe up on charges. But no one is stating the obvious. This, in my opinion, it's obvious. This is Joe. And that's why the Hunter thing is just him, CYA, I think. That was my little tidbit. I thought that was a shocking little text.
It is. I think you, yeah. I knew a little bit of your research on that from listening to your show, and it's wild. Like, it's hard to imagine how much corruption the American people can put up with. Like, the system, it's the same in the UK, but in the UK, how most corrupt are usually the people above the politicians. The politicians are kind of a bit weaker, but in your case with like the Bidens, it's blown me away.
Documented. I got this from the Congressional Record. This isn't me down a rabbit hole. This is like, what the hell?
When you say how much corruption people can put up with, I mean, let me give you the Mexico case. It's in many ways, it's also worse here. And just like, what can you do? Like, there's nothing you can do. And it's just, that's my thing. When he pardoned Hunter, it's kind of like, I mean, it's a banana republic. It's a mafia. It's like, yeah, what are you going to do?
Obamacare demonstrated to me, I realized this. It wasn't COVID. It was Obamacare. We did not want federal health care. It was unconstitutional. I marched against it numerous times. My husband, who doesn't even do that stuff, all my friends, we went to Washington. We were against it. We voted against it. Everyone knew it was strong-armed legislatively. And then when it finally passed and it was totally unconstitutional, went to the Supreme Court, very clearly, completely erroneous judgment that it was constitutional. It was not. They said it was a spending bill and it originated in the Senate, which you cannot do. And that to me said, okay, we actually used the process to the best of our ability. The American people, they got off the couch. We did everything we could and we were crammed down. And that was it. That was it, in my opinion.
And when you say that was it, I guess that's it. That's all, folks. We did
Yikes.
hour and a half.
Pill. Come on. Merry Christmas. Come on, guys. Merry
that's
Christmas.
right. We won't be here
Christmas,
until the next year. So definitely Merry Christmas. I've got nothing else.
Don't freeze your turkeys. Over Thanksgiving, I accidentally froze the entire turkey the night before.
Okay. If it's our Christmas edition, we should all, just let's end on just what you're doing for Christmas. Do you have a
positive? Exactly. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just happy to have my kids home. My kids are both in college, and except for my special guy who's here all the time. And there's sometimes a white Christmas isn't a necessity. In Southern California, sometimes it can be fine to put Christmas lights on a palm.
White Christmas. That's racist. No, I'm just kidding. I'll be hanging out. I don't know what I'll be doing, but probably just hanging out and maybe doing less podcasts, taking a break, and just relaxing for the holy days, the holiday. Yeah.
Is it Christmas Eve for you guys in Croatia? And do you carry that tradition to Mexico with you? Because we celebrate Christmas Eve as the most important day, and Christmas Day is kind of the wind down day.
Yeah, Christmas Eve is like the big day, and then the 25th is when you just sleep late and eat the leftovers and relax. And you just reminded me, though, of a story. Andrea Klaric, who does a great podcast called Slobodny Podcast, he interviews a lot of the folks that we know from alternative media in English, and it's televised live. Somehow he has access to television channel in Croatia. I think every Saturday or Sunday, televised and translated subtitles into Croatian. I think they have in the capital of Zagreb, in the main plaza, they have Advent activities already. And they've got like different stands and stuff. They're selling food and things like that, I think, in these weeks leading up to Christmas. And he just did a video how they don't accept cash. He went to stand after stand after stand after stand and asked, do you guys take cash? No, credit card only, or like phone or credit card.
Wow.
And then one of the guys said, why? He's like, the organizers. And then what made me think was how these people don't like these people who are selling the food or wares or drinks. Like, they don't care. They're just like, they don't even think twice about this. And and then there was a hotel in Zagreb also that stopped taking cash now. It's only card only. So you're seeing bit by bit in hotels first, shops, it's cashless. But
even flea markets, that's big.
And then soon, I think it's going to be slowly. You'll be going to many places and it's just like, oh, cash.
When you see the homeless guy putting out his
square,
non-painless,
that's it. It's game over then.
Zip your square.
Yeah.
All right. Well, people.
How about you, Mike? Well, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So we're too fully loaded on animals, so we can't really go too far. So yeah, we
eat some of them.
Oh yeah, we harvest out. We grew and raised our first ever turkey. So we harvest her about a month ago, all grass fed, and she's huge, and it's gonna last us for weeks, I'm sure. So I'm excited to cook that thing, and I'm going to do a full English Christmas dinner instead of a Polish one because they're completely different. So I'm excited for that as well.
I wish I could be there.
If the hypersonics don't fly from Moscow before that, then
we were doing
I'll
so
hold up
well
my turkey. I'll hold up my
Jack.
turkey in that in the irradiation. It'll cook in like 10 seconds. I'm sure it'll be fantastic.
There you go. Way to pull it out of the ditch.
I think we're good. We're good for a while from that stuff. All right. Well, I guess we'll see folks in the new year. People can always find me at Geopolitics and Empire.com.
Yeah, parallelmike.com for my podcast or Parallel Systems broadcast. And my community is on Patreon and also Substack.
And you can find the Monica Perez Show on your favorite podcasting platform. You can find show notes at monicaperezshow.com. And I do live streams on YouTube and Rockfin and Rumble most weekdays at 2:00 Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern.